before we get into kind of the meat and potatoes of the meeting, what I want to do is just kind of share with you all just a few things that we're still discussing right now. And we haven't worked out the details on this, but I just wanted to kind of share with you all, we haven't lost sight of it. So I'll just kind of share a few things here on my list. You know, one is, I do want to make sure we get back in front of this group to talk about the budget and dollars that we'll have to see some of these things come to life. So what we're trying to figure out is how do we kind of share with this group in a regular cadence, kind of what the budget truly looks like. I know we had a conversation about that, I believe, previously, at least with the steering committee, but we're still talking about that, because what I don't want to have happen is, you know, we have all this work teed up, ideas teed up, but there's no dollars to go with it. There will be dollars, but I want to make sure there's some transparency around that. So we're still trying to figure out how to go about doing that. So that remains on the radar screen. We also want to make sure that when we talk about you know, the things that the city will be responsible for doing, that we're getting an update from the city on progress that they're making with regards to things that are really kind of center to what their responsibilities are. So along with these committee readouts, how do we give this group transparency into what the city is already doing, what's already underway? So still trying to figure that piece out so that we can share that with the group. The other thing that came up, I think Tawana Bain, I think you raised this point, and that is, I think for some of you, there's an appetite to say, hey, how do I get involved beyond the actual ideation of what we're trying to do? How can I help potentially bring it to life? So we're just trying to figure out how to structure that and bring that back in front of this group. So again, I don't have an answer for you today. I want to let you know that we are thinking about that. We want to talk about that a bit more. So that's something that's on the radar screen as well. So just a few things that I wanted to share with the group. Again, no details yet, but it's something that we're still working through. We'll talk more about it in future meetings. So with that, what I wanted to do is just kind of open it up, whether it's to the steering committee leaders before we get into the deep dive of their report outs, or really anyone else, just any general perspective or feedback that would be helpful to the group from previous from our previous committee meetings, or even the racial equity and inclusion toolkit meeting that we had. Just want to make sure I can open up the floor for any general comments, questions, ideas, concerns before we get into the committee readouts. And I know this group is not a quiet group, so you guys won't be shy, but I'll just give it a second here.
This is Vanessa. How are you doing, Doug?
Hey, Vanessa, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm okay. I just wanted to say that in the last week, we actually have had a group of people that have done a survey of the downtown area for issues of cleanliness or stuff that just kind of pops out. And we basically have a scale of 1 to 4, and we were actually surprised at how relatively clean it looks, with the exception of the homeless. And I did tell that to the downtown partnership people yesterday. We actually have done throughout Jefferson County, but we just now redid the downtown, and I mean, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I've also met with the downtown partnership, and we are giving them the new medvac that will help them to expand their area and to help to improve the level of cleanliness in those areas that we have not done, with the exception of the homeless one, which is what we have an ongoing issue with. Right. But the level of cleanliness is not that bad. We just got y'all have to just figure out a way how to get people to come back downtown.
No, that's a great update. Thanks for sharing that, Vanessa. Quite frankly, it's that plus how do we keep it that way? I mean, how do we make it sustainable so we don't have to have this have the conversation in the future? But no, thanks for sharing that. That's a good update. Appreciate it.
Okay.
What else? Anything else?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Anyone else before we get into the committee updates?
Nope.
Okay. If not, just one thing I do want to say, just as a reminder, I think we all know it, but it goes without saying that as we think about this work that we're, that we're taking on and that we're marching towards an end of May deadline for, what I would say is, this idea of revitalizing downtown. Hopefully what we're charging after is not trying to bring downtown back to the way it was before the pandemic. And really what we're trying to do is how do we make downtown better than it was? This is not about getting back to the way things used to be. This is about making it better overall for everyone in every dimension. And how do we kind of take what we're trying to do and have that vision, have that be, the flag on the hill that we're chasing after, something better than what we had before versus trying to get something back that was good, but I think we would all admit could have been better. So I would just say, keep that in the back of your minds as you think about the work that we're going to do for the next couple of months. And this is not about getting back to the way things were. This is about making it better than it ever was. And that's very aspirational, but I think if we chase after that, I think we'll be more satisfied with what we end up with on the back end of this effort here. Okay. Okay, with that, I think, Andrea, keep me honest here, and Tawana, I think you would like to go first here because I think you had a conflict later on, and we wanted to make sure you had ample time to kind of talk about what your team's been up to. So if I think that's the case, you guys let me know.
Yes, Douglas,
Yep.
Douglas, if we could take those committee report outs out of order with Tawana being first,
Okay.
and then Dan Hartledge also
Okay.
has to leave early, that would be
Okay.
great.
Perfect. Okay, let's do that. So that's okay with everyone else. Tawana, I'll give the floor to you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so very much, everyone. And yes, on Thursdays when we meet, I do have a standing 2 p.m. conflict. So I want you all to know I am excited about this work, but it is a conflict that I have had for a while. So I'm just going to really quickly, for those that are not as familiar with our committee, just kind of go over what the charge for our committee is. And we are charged with considering how to leverage Louisville's existing arts, culture, and sports scene as spring and summer approach and vaccine distribution reaches more of the residents. We are also going to be looking to develop innovative events that can contribute to a vibrant, engaging environment. And essentially what that means is not only are we looking to come up with innovative things, but how do we tack on what we come up with to existing events and assets that we have in the community to help propel what they're doing as well as what we are doing. So we're looking and breaking this down based on the template that was provided by the steering committee with SMART goals first. And so within the next 30 days, and we're looking towards April 21st as our target, our primary goal is to create a draft plan for weekly events in the summer. Each weekly event would be in a different downtown location with a unique theme or focus that would support various businesses and arts organizations. And to divide and conquer for that, we've broken down into 3 subcommittees from our committee. The committees that we've broken down into will lead compiling this calendar of events. And one way in which we've tried to do that as it relates to ensuring that our DE&I charter is not overlooked is being intentional about looking for both Black-led as well as non-Black-led organizations that hold events in the downtown area. Right now, I think we've got a working list somewhere in the neighborhood of 26. Carl with Louisville Sports Commission, as well as Kristen Boone with Fund for the Arts, and I believe Kim Baker, who might be on vacation, has really done a great job at not only helping compile this list, but making sure that we've got contact information for organizations so that we can reach out to them. If there is anyone on our overall committee, and it's okay if there's some redundancy in what we've identified, that is familiar with organizations, whether small or large, put on quality events, especially those that most don't know about. We want to learn, we want to know about them. So please feel free to reach out to myself. The Metro committee member that has been designated to me is Rachel. And forgive me, I can't think of Rachel's last name off the top of my head. If we could drop it in the chat. She has just been phenomenal. So with all the moving parts that I have going on, she's helped keep me buttoned up. So please copy her. Rachel Casey. Thank you, Andrea. In addition to the calendar of events committee, we also have our themes and our experiences committee. We also understand that we want to be intentional about the types of events and the themes that are being developed. So having some brain power around that is underway. And then proposed locations. And so naturally, we've already witnessed, the difference of opinion as it relates to what is comprised of downtown. And so we're putting some thought around what that looks like and ensuring that we are being intentional and inclusive about where we are promoting or executing events. So that is what our goal is within the next 30 days. We do have a doodle poll that has been out to our committee because we do recognize that there will be meetings, sidebar meetings that we will have to hold. And so we will make sure that we share those out with anyone that is interested in either sitting in or just kind of knowing what is happening. And I do believe that my assistant within my internal organizations, there may have been one or two people that reached out after learning that I was chairing this committee and wanted to know about those dates. I believe we just closed that doodle poll. So those dates are not concrete yet, but we are happy to share those out with anyone that is interested in partaking. Our 60 to 90 day goals is essentially to flesh out the proposed weekly events and potentially developing an additional steering committee for each event that we decide we want to pursue. That committee would include determining logistics, personnel, and participants, and of course, costs and funding. And as Douglas mentioned earlier, that is something that is in the works. So we too hope to have more concrete information for all of you once we have it on this end. And then our next SMART goal is 120 days out. So that's July 20th and beyond. And what we've listed here is because the schedule for weekly events is still to be determined, the 120-day plus goal is a variable. And it's possible that these events may extend beyond July 20th, and if successful, could be repeated annually in some kind of format. Resources needed to meet our goals. Committee members will need to volunteer their time to meet the 30-day goal. I've been really pleased with everyone, and thank you for your grace. I know we are all extremely busy. And so that is something that I feel like we've been able to reach successfully. And then talent. Our committee, we've got a wide range of expertise that should be sufficient for reaching the or achieving the 30-day goal, but we know that there's going to be additional talents that will be needed beyond that. So if there are those of you that have talents or know of others or volunteers specifically in the committee or in the community, please connect us with them. And that's everything from planning to entertainment to arts capabilities, so on and so forth, business owners, institutional or organizational. And then treasure, and, as we mentioned just a moment ago, we are working through what the funding looks like, but we're also don't want to be reliant only on any sort of government funding. We're also looking for private funding and ways in which we might establish or develop sponsorship levels that can lend to the work that we're doing. And then data. Anyone that has a background and expertise in collecting data or managing analytics, we'd love to have you. We want to be able to stay informed on how things are working, who's involved, and how success is being tracked. I mentioned earlier, how is the committee addressing DE&I? We're starting really out of the gate, even just with how we're looking at the calendar of events that exist. And naturally, this is work that I do. So I hope that in addition to the DE&I, I can help keep our committee always thinking of DE&I and keeping it front and center. Some of our high priority long-term issues beyond 180 days that need to find a home. These are our parking lot issues. Right now, we do not have any for right now. So as those develop, we will keep you guys apprised of those. Other than that, I believe that is all that I have, and I'm happy. I'm not certain if we're taking questions or if we're getting through all report outs prior to.
Yeah, no, if I would like to open it up to see if anyone has any questions, comments, because really this, I've been a part of meetings before where folks feel like it's just a readout to present. And for me, it's not just that. It's about us having a dialogue and making sure we're connecting the dots on other bodies of work, and we're challenging each other on things that may need some different thinking if you feel like there needs to be some different thinking. So this is really meant to be a working session. So yes, I'd like to open it up to see if there's any comments, questions Tawana and team. And Tawana, I like what you did there with regard, which was a very good readout, by the way. I appreciate the detail. Saying, hey, look, look, we need some help here. If you want to, if you have expertise or connections in this space, please reach out to us. We could use some help here. I think those are the types of things that we should be talking about on this call. There's a lot of expertise here on this call. That's the reason why we asked, the folks here on this call to volunteer and help with this effort. So I think that's a great way of soliciting help with expertise that's right here on this call. So I would encourage others to think about that as well. And Andrea, are we, just remind me, I should know this. I'm embarrassed to say I don't. What Tawana just shared, do we have, are we asking folks to kind of put that in a document that will be shared so that we can kind of cascade this out to others? Because maybe people might have things that they can't think about right now that they might think about later. Is there a way to kind of get some of this out to maybe, can you speak to that just a bit, if we have a process for that?
Sure. So what we do is we provide a form for the committee leads to fill out during their meeting. They're welcome to elaborate on that form. It's just the beginning. It's not a ceiling. And so if there are additional notes that they want to put on that form, that would be great. We're also asking for the chairs to submit that form to us, probably shortly before this meeting or after if you forgot, so we can have those on file. That way, when we're working on the action plan, we'll be able to reference the previous committee reports.
Okay, thanks. Okay, if there are no comments or questions for Tawana Bain and her team, we will move to the next one. So I think Dan, you're up next. I'll give you the floor.
Righty, thanks, Douglas, and thank you, Tawana. Well done. I think a couple of things. I'll start with an overview of our committee and then kind of delve into some of the topics we discussed and how it sounds like we're going to have a lot of overlap among some of the different committees. I am the chair of the Residential and Occupiers Committee, and the committee charge is to prioritize the perspectives of downtown residents and put forth strategies to support those living downtown, including uplifting stories and insights of these residents as a way to increase the number of downtown residents and draw more visitors downtown. As we all know, and as we all agreed during our committee meeting recently, anything we do in the next 30 days is not necessarily going to bring new residents downtown. It's not that simple for people just to decide and move downtown in the next 60 or 30 or 60 days. But we did certainly all agree that we can leverage ourselves as people who are already downtown, who have chosen to live downtown, who have decided that we want to stay downtown, that we are in some way, we have a unique opportunity as ambassadors of life downtown, and that we have an opportunity to paint a picture of what it is like to live downtown, and by extension, paint a picture of what it can be like to visit downtown and to enjoy the area. So, so that was our overall approach in terms of our meeting. The first thing we did, we had a conversation and talked some in terms of what we see and hear. And again, because we're here 24/7, what we see and hear downtown, that in terms of some of the things we see and hear that are good, things that we think need improvement, and things that maybe as an organization, as an entire committee of and all the different committees that are meeting here, we can all kind of keep in mind and address and so forth. We've talked about them, a lot of them already, such things as a market, a grocery store downtown. It was agreed that would be a nice to have, if not a necessity, at least a very nice thing to have. We've talked before in these meetings, and we talked some during our committee meeting about just concerns about safety, perceptions about safety. As we've talked here, and certainly it's being addressed in a whole lot of different ways, and that has to do with the homeless issue. Individuals that are, the fact is that there are not a lot of people on the streets these days, and our homeless neighbors are much more visible now. And there's an opportunity there for all of us in that they are more visible. There's an opportunity for all of us to be more aware of that and to play a role in addressing that. But at the same time, for some, because they are more visible, there is, some find that disconcerting and uncomfortable. So we talked about a lot about those types of things, safety issues and perceived concerns about crime and the like. As a group, we talked about, I think all of these committees, and I saw a few emails bouncing around the last few days about things that transpired during the various committee meetings. I think this is me speaking more than the committee, but I have a hunch that we're all going to be talking a lot today about events, activities that we as individual committees might be visualizing that could help attract people downtown. I think one thing that I'm already sensing is we probably need to coordinate all of that because there are a lot of different committees. I have a hunch based on what I've been talking to some of you guys that we're all kind of brainstorming about committees, but certainly events and activities. But certainly our committee talked about that. We talked about different types of events that we could attract and we could create as a committee. We also talked about parking holidays. Floated the idea around about designating and seeing if the city could work with us to designate a day a week or one particular weekend or maybe one particular 3-day weekend where parking downtown is free anywhere in terms of any of the public lots or meters. And within that day or within that 3-day period, a series of events or activities be staged downtown to bring people down. We also had some discussions about, again, the residents piggybacking on the Downtown Strong initiative, and the residents taking to social media and taking snapshots or maybe very brief videos on our smartphones and downloading them on our own social media platforms and maybe on some of your platforms as well. Essentially snapshots of our backyard. We all have different backyards as downtown residents, and just simply snapshots of our backyard and snapshots of our neighborhood, just depicting what it's like to live in the urban area downtown. So we had discussions about taking that onto social media. And I mentioned events earlier. I'll touch on that one last time here. And I think the most compelling thing we walked away with was the creation of an event or a series of events or a designation of a day where the community at large is essentially encouraged, invited to come downtown for a day, for an evening, for a meal, for a drink, or perhaps for an event that we as an organization help stage, whether it's closing down part of a downtown street for restaurants and for dining, for a band, for music. The big lot over here by the Omni Hotel, perhaps a large block of green space, perhaps utilizing that piece of property for some type of outdoor event. And not so much through anything that would be contrived as much as just grassroots social media, communicating to the community about that event or about that day or that series of events. And again, perhaps looking for an opportunity to waive parking on that day. We were very, a priority that we, as we got into that conversation we wanted to make sure that all types of neighborhoods and communities were invited and felt invited. And as we talked through it, it became a priority really to make sure that the neighbors and the neighborhoods around downtown were invited and encouraged and felt welcomed to any such events we come up with. So Old Louisville, Russell, Parkland, Butchertown, all the areas that are sort of on the edges of downtown, to work through their neighborhood associations, as well as individual residents in those communities, to ensure that they felt welcomed, and in fact, that we indeed created an event or a series of events that welcomed all sectors of the community as well. I think that's as far as we got. We did not really delve too far into the 60 or 120-day period. We got to that point, and I think we're at a point now where, as a committee, everybody felt ready to move forward with the creation of some type of an event, and creation of a day that, through social media and through other channels, the community feels sees an opportunity to go downtown and do something. But clearly, as we've talked the last few days, and some people in this group have talked, clearly there are a lot of planning going on and a lot of discussions about events. So it'll be interesting to compare notes moving forward. But that concludes my report, and certainly I'm up for questions and comments and feedback as well.
This is Yvonne. I want to say thank you so much for all that you all are doing. This is phenomenal. I do think that we have to address two things, though. I think we've got to have some maker space for our cultural artists. We have to make sure that there is space downtown where they're present and housed and capable of being an integral part of the lived experience of our tourism traffic. And I think it has to be everything from our artists who are doing visual, but also performance. And I know at one point we talked with Rebecca Flyshaker about having performance space available for Black artists to program, and or for cultural artists to program in downtown. I think that is critical. And I also want to say, we also, I think, should walk headlong, and I'd love to hear other people's opinion about it, but headlong into the discussion around those that are still protesting and are still in pain from the past experiences. How do we envelope them in this process and make them a part of rebuilding, so that we're doing it together and we're not doing it absent them, and then we still have tourists seeing them on the peripheral? I think there's a way to do all of this where people feel a part of it and feel ownership in it. And I think we have to be intentional about that, because to do it absent that, I think we're just setting ourselves up for a negative experiences with our tourists, and I don't think we can afford that.
Well said, Yvonne. Thank you. The performances by cultural artists, I think, is an outstanding point, and it's certainly something, as our committee moves forward, that's certainly the type of thing we ought to think about and pursue. Thank you.
Yeah, look, I would second that. Yvonne, I think it's a great point regarding, what you said about folks who are still, look, there's still a lot of raw emotion, and rightfully so, over what's happened here in Louisville last year, and how do we include them in the process? How do we embrace them in the process as we think about an inclusive revitalization of downtown Louisville? So to build on what Dan just said, I completely agree with the points that you made. What else? And just what Yvonne did there, just that's a great example. Lori Ann Roberts sent out, I think I sent it out to the committee leaders with ideas as well, to say, hey, look, this came up, or I have a thought. I'm not sure where it sits, but it needs to be said. Those are the types of things that we should be doing in this meeting, even in between meetings via email, so that all the ideas, even if it doesn't sit with you, you don't feel like it sits with you and what you've been charged with doing your committee. Let's make sure it's shared with the broader group, and let's determine whether or not it should sit somewhere else, so that that debate can be had on whether or not it rises to the prioritization of making it to the final plan. So again, that's the spirit of what we're trying to do here in these meetings.
Okay, thank you. So in that spirit, I want to pick up on something that Yvonne said, and that I've been thinking about for a long time. So Yvonne used the word makerspace, but in the context of artists, and Yvonne and I haven't talked about this, so I'm not sure if she's thinking about the same thing I'm thinking about. But I have long thought that what we need is something on a much smaller, more accessible scale to what I think is GE is doing up on the U of L campus, of a real makerspace. Because there are a lot of really talented, creative, skilled young people who just can't start, have a business idea about making a product, making something, but they can't afford the equipment. They don't necessarily have the skills to use all of the equipment. But if there could be a partnership between one of the universities and maybe a large corporation like GE to create a real makerspace in downtown, I think it would draw people because they're so interesting to look and see what people are doing. And it also would be a great way of bringing inclusivity and sort of micro business development. Is, Chef Space sort of has done that in some way for food related businesses, but I think we really need one for stuff. I don't know how else to say it, but it's not food, it's not necessarily art, it's products, sellable products.
Julie, you just hit on something. I don't know if Aaron Jordan is on here, but Aaron Jordan has that expertise, and that is something that he's been working on. And I think another thing that we have to do is make sure we don't sit it something like this with just the big corporations in the university. I think we have to have that local artists, boots on the ground, grassroots feel. And so I think we have to get behind a local person and undergird them with the big corporation and the university to make it happen. But I think that Aaron just expressed that very thing to me this week, and I think it would be huge to have that happening in downtown as a part of our reimagined downtown.
Thanks. And so to committee leaders, looking at taking Julie's idea there, I mean, from a space standpoint, does that sit with commercial occupiers? Doug and team, is it Tawana? From an arts music perspective, Cleo, Tour. I mean, I think there's a number of folks who could say, hey, I could maybe take a crack at that and just kind of think about that a bit more. But I would just ask for those committee leaders to say, hey, look, does that make sense for that to sit in my committee and for me to do something with that? So I appreciate that, Julie. Thank you. I do want to push us along here just a bit. I want to be thoughtful of everyone's time. So, and thanks, Dan, for that update. I appreciate it. Cleo, do you want to go next? And let's pivot to tourism, convention center, museums, parks. I'll give you the floor.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. And I certainly have appreciated all the comments thus far and taking notes here. This is going to be a bit of a tag team. I did not make our first meeting call, so at some point I'm going to turn this over to Ted to talk about some of the content of what actually took place on the committee call. But I will just, as Dan and Tawana did, I will remind folks of the charge for this particular committee is to focus on what can be done to support anchor institutions located in downtown Louisville. These anchors provide amenities that drive residents and tourists to the heart of the city for business and leisure, and will help fuel Louisville's economic recovery. And that under that space is tourism, convention center, parks, hotels, and museums. So that's the charge of the group. The one thing I thought I would do before I turn it over to Ted to get into some of the ideas that came from the committee is to talk a little bit about what we have done as an industry in the DEI space, because I think it's important that from the training we had last week or the week before, that we do have that that filter on the things that we're doing. From a Louisville tourism perspective, there's a couple of things that we're doing. One, for our industry, which would include all of the players in the title of our charge here, is that Louisville Tourism does a quarterly DEI training for our industry, complimentary for our industry. We started this last summer as part of the work to try to make sure our industry is more inclusive to our visitors. We've used the subject matter experts that were referred to us from the Louisville Urban League, and we've done 3 of these roughly hour and a half to 2 hour trainings per quarter. So we've done 3 of them, and we'll do another one probably sometime in June as we work with our industry at large to improve being inclusive. The other thing that we have done, as you think about our museums and our attractions, we have developed what we call the Unfiltered Truth Collection. And I will put that link into the chat once I get through with this process, speaking to you all. And this is a program. We wanted to develop this program, and we started the development of this program prior to all that took place last summer, and I honestly prior to the pandemic itself. And our goal was to grow African American visitation, leisure visitation to our community. Prior to the pandemic, we had 19 million people who visited Louisville annually, either for leisure, corporate, or meeting, convention, and events. And of that 19 million, about 11% of that was African American visitation. So that's a number that we had set a goal to grow. Part of that is developing content. And so we've worked with 7 of our museums and attractions. 3 of those, I believe, or 4, are downtown to develop content as it relates to Black heritage, history, and culture. For example, the Evan Williams Bourbon Experience right here on Main Street tells the story of Tom Bullock, who was the first African American to develop a cocktail book while working at the Pendemis Club. And so we have 7 different museums and attractions who have developed content in that space, and it has been launched as the Unfiltered Truth Collection. And the last piece I'll talk about that just happened this week, we are on the last day of hosting the African American Travel Conference, which is in town right now. And again, these are travel planners who plan trips for African Americans all over the country. And the part of our strategy was to bring a group like this in to Louisville to, again, work to increase our visitation of African American leisure visitors to the community. So I wanted to give you all that as sort of a backdrop so that from a DEI perspective in this industry, whether it's convention center, parks, hotels, and museums, or tourism in general, you understand what some of the efforts around DEI have been. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ted and have Ted walk you through some of the ideas that came forth from the committee meeting. Ted?
Thanks so much, Cleo. So yeah, I'm a poor stand-in for Cleo, but I had to pinch hit for the committee, so just bear with me. So we have a really good group of folks, really eager to sort of get going now. So the timeline for the planning for this reopening is too long for the appetite of this group. So there's a lot of focus on Derby, and I know that the eye rolling can start now, but for many of the folks who run these institutions, they're the clock for the year starts with Derby for many of them,
Ted,
right?
Ted, just a second. Hey, if just a reminder, if you're not speaking, you could put your phone on mute. We're getting quite a bit of feedback, and I want to make sure we have a good call experience for everybody.
Right. Thanks. So there's a focus on trying to get maybe some pilot work done in the few weeks that we have until Derby with the 60,000 folks that are supposed to be attending. So, there's not much time, but there was real appetite for figuring out, what's coming in from the hotels. It's obviously great to have Cleo at the helm. So we get the best possible optics on how many of the folks planning to come in for Derby are traveling in and staying here versus our. So there was talk about cross promotion for the organizations that are open, for them thinking through their hours, just as a way to sort of dust off the cobwebs and sort of get going. I think more broadly, then there's a lot of interest in if it's going to be sometime before some of the commercial tenants come back. There definitely was a fair amount of discussion about some limited road closures. So while Dan's giving away free parking, we're busy closing the streets that you can't park on. So that idea is just very much to expand restaurant capacity in the time that we have right in front of us, right before we have everybody vaccinated. There's obviously still going to be some public health concerns. So there was a vibrant discussion about, closures of Main Street, maybe on the weekends, maybe in the evenings, whatever. We obviously need to do some homework to figure out what the art of the possible is there. But, that was really to stimulate business, to make it possible to expand the ability to serve many more visitors into downtown for dining at the very least, but other kinds of hopefully retail and recreational experiences. A lot of discussion about leveraging Waterfront Park and the park system more generally as part of the proposition. As we move out of the near term, there was an appetite for how we can really introduce visitors to Louisville to the surrounding neighborhoods around downtown, how walkable, scooter, bus circulator routes could be part of really getting people moving around. And so I think an appetite to sort of reprogram the walkable, bikeable, scooterable experience of downtown. So kind of a programmatic thing. And then, just longer term, really thinking through, as Cleo just mentioned, what needs to happen to be a more welcoming city for a much broader demographic. And, I think that's it's all the work all the time, but definitely there's probably a lot more opportunity over time to continue to work with things that are working to attract a much broader community to Louisville and have a wider variety of things for them to do. So I think there was broad agreement that this was a great opportunity. Douglas, as you said, we're not just trying to return to 2019 Louisville, but there is an opportunity to sort of rebrand and recast the experience. So it's a great group, really ready to go is the truth. Thanks.
Thanks, Cleo and Ted. Appreciate it. Great update. Any comments, questions, thoughts before we move on? And Cleo, you did this well, and so did some of the other speakers, emphasizing the diversity, equity, inclusion thread through the comments, by frankly opening up with that so that we can all, keep to the commitment of the charter that brings this body of work together, and kind of reminding the group of that and making sure that's integrated into the work here up front, I think is really important. So thanks for emphasizing that.
Douglas, it's Doug. I was just going to comment on Ted. You made a comment about closing the streets at night, and you said, like, I don't know if the commercial committee would agree. I would be 100% in favor of that. And I think most would, because that's stuff that's going to happen outside of rush hour. And, it's an offhanded comment, but if you look at the streets downtown right now, most of them are closed thanks to some of our utility companies. So, if we could get that work done, and then, I know a lot of larger cities do it. And I think that, having that brings more people into downtown, right? And then it's going to directly benefit employers and the businesses that are already down there. So, as long as it's not a rush hour closing, which I don't think it would be, I think you'd have full support from the business community.
Cleo,
Thanks,
you're
Doug.
on mute.
All right, anyone else?
Sorry about that. Douglas, I would just say, similar to what Tawana's asked was, if there's someone that's on this call that has insight on what it does take to close a street, I know Nulu has done that for events and festivals. I know there is something to the fact that if it's a state highway, it may not be able, like 3rd Street, maybe you cannot close that. But I do think it's certainly an idea worth looking into. From Dan, from Doug, Ted debriefed me from our call that came up. And I just think an opportunity to, close the streets for a brief period of time so folks can spill out into the street from the restaurants and from shops and from events going on. I just think I think that's a fantastic idea, but I do not know the policy rules, laws around being able to do that. So if someone's got some insight and you want to share it with my committee and others on this call, that would be great. Thanks, Douglas.
Hey, Cleo, this is Carl. So we have experience with the Ironman, with our half marathon, and a couple of other events closing streets. So we can offline, we can help talk to you about how it works.
Great.
And hey, Cleo, this is Mike King with Louisville Metro. I run a lot of programs through the city that close a lot of different streets. So I've got a lot of experience with that. So similar to what Carl said, happy to help in any way you guys need.
Okay, fantastic.
Perfect. Thanks, Carl and Michael, for raising your hand to Cleo's question and ask there. Okay.
Maybe I should insert something here. I apologize. I'm Ben Baker with KYTC. And I know a lot of us are looking at streets that can be closed, and there are 3 main state arteries. There's 2nd Street, 9th Street, Main Market. Regarding, we just got done painting 2nd Street Bridge, as you guys know. And essentially we did that in conjunction with NDOT, so that now they're working on the Sherman Minton. We have to keep 2nd Street Bridge open to facilitate our bondholder agreement with the feds. So essentially, for no reason can we shut down 2nd Street for any reason. And I know someone was discussing a Main Street closure from like 1st to 9th or something like that. I think I'd really need to review some durations of the closure that we're going to be on Main Street and the length of the blocks. But I think things between 3rd and 9th on weekends or short durations are available for consideration, but without Rachel Casey to make a traffic control plan so we can review and look at the detour plans. Because again, we can't disturb the logistics of businesses downtown. And I apologize for taking up so much time to say that, but I wanted to take a moment, and I know a lot of this keeps coming up that people want to close streets. And I thought it'd be prudent to say, I think there are possibilities for some of those as long as 2nd Street is not disturbed. But just keep that in mind. And if you have any questions, I think maybe me and Rachel Casey could get together and figure that out. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's utility work, but 2nd Street at the bridge is all but closed right now. I know it's utility work, but it takes an hour to get through that intersection. So
there are concessions for emergency or accidents that occur. I don't think those are avoidable at all, and no one can really anticipate when a utility is going to fail or if there's an accident. But essentially what that is if the Sherman Minton is able to close, there has to be another non-tolled artery.
Ben, thanks for speaking up. And I think I think having that backdrop to help kind of educate everyone on kind of the parameters and the considerations that go into things like that is helpful. And Andrea, I'm going to push us along here a bit, but maybe Andrea, in our notes, if you all are okay with it, to kind of say for folks who have questions about road closures, hey, Ben has some experience around this. Michael has some experience. Carl has, just folks who we can kind of say, hey, look, if you had a question, if you guys are okay with it, reach out and I'm happy to kind of potentially answer those questions if that's good with you guys to be a part of something like that, just to have your name next to something like that. I think those types of things are helpful to get quick answers to people's questions. So we could maybe do that, Andrea, if those guys don't object to that. I think that'd be good for all of us.
Would you like me to list their contact information? Is that okay? Or email addresses?
Is that okay with you guys? I mean, Ben, Carl, Michael, is that okay with you guys? So I think to Ben, your point, this question continues to come up. So if we can spirit, folks who really have some expertise there, I think it would be good just to kind of streamline things. Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up and a head nod. So yep, I think we're good, Andrea.
Okay, if I can't find your email, please go ahead and put it in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, guys, appreciate it. We're going to keep us moving here. So next one, Gabrielle Gassaway, Marketing and Communication. So we'll give you the floor.
Awesome, thank you. I'll try to be as quick as I can. We had a lot of
I'll have to call him.
We had a lot of open discussion, really just like brainstorming. And I guess I'll go back and kind of review the charge for anyone who doesn't know. Our committee is focused on developing and promoting messaging that will encourage Louisvillians from all walks of life to return to downtown and attract potential visitors, and also build upon existing messaging and determine new ways to spread positive transformational messages about city's recovery. And so a lot of our conversation was actually around how can we leverage and enhance existing marketing projects, most specifically the Downtown Strong campaign. One thing that came up is that because it's open sourced, we don't really know in what communities it's been largely promoted in. And so one of our goals is going to be to help promote the existing messages more broadly across the county. So one thing we'll need to do probably is find a way to get some metrics around that. And I don't remember who was commenting. It might have been Dan earlier talking about using social media as a tool to share imagery of like what's going on downtown, to try to attract folks from different communities to see like what activity is going on, and the activity is happening now. We had a lot of conversation around using marketing to bring more Black and people of color owned businesses and restaurants downtown. And so as an anecdote to that, I think a lot of our work is going to hinge on the work that's being done by other groups, and how we can get the word out on the projects and events that you all are doing. This being one of those things, we can't necessarily be responsible for what it looks like to bring those businesses, but would absolutely love to work with you all, whoever that falls under, to promote that message. Also, as far as like DEI goes, focusing on inclusive messaging with adjacent neighborhoods, and then also putting a focus on the Black and other people of color's like downtown experience. Like, what does that look like for them, and how do we better market to them to let them know that they're welcome and we want them to be a part of all of the events that are going on downtown. One other thing that was a really great idea that came out of the group was how, well, first off, we were talking about identifying target audiences. We can't just have marketing that is generalized to the county at large. That doesn't actually make sense. Everybody's looking for different things in their entertainment. Everybody's looking for different things when they're trying to come downtown for business, et cetera. And so really focusing on having like niche groups that we're targeting certain messages to. And out of that conversation came, how do we attract young professionals and college students? And some ideas that were shared are like, can we have ambassadors at some of the universities who are promoting messages for some of the events and things that you all are planning? And for some of the organizations that are now having their employees come back downtown, could we have like welcome back committees of those organizations to help promote like events or whatever after work to sort of generate more business and traffic downtown? So just a few ideas. We didn't really get into the 30, 60, 90, et cetera goals, but really just had a brainstorming session, and I think are prepared to jump in our next meeting and hone in on goals with timelines and such.
Thanks, Gabrielle. Any comments, questions, thoughts, as Gabrielle was giving her committee update that you want to share with her or the group? And Gabrielle, you know, for you and the group, I mean, is there anything that you all need help with that you think you might have some expertise here from this group that could really kind of advance or evolve the work that you all are doing?
In this moment, I don't have anything
Okay.
just based off of our initial conversation, but I can absolutely come back to this group if anything comes up.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Let's move on to commercial occupiers. So Doug?
Yep. Thank you, Douglas. So I'll, what I'm going to do is just kind of run down. We had several topics. I'm just going to run through those really quickly, and then I'll come back to how DE&I or how they relate or to DE&I and how we're going to work on that. But you know, to really summarize what we talked about, it boils down to three things: safety, downtown activity, and its incentives. So money. So there's dollars. So there's, and I think that really, that, you know, Douglas at the beginning said, you know, there's going to be a budget. We've got to figure that out. But I think that's going to be the big thing for us. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we can do, but we can't do it without. And, you know, I wanted to speak to, I think Yvonne talked about makerspace, and, you know, we have a number of office towers that have vacant space that would be great. The problem is, you know, owners face, you know, tremendous construction costs to fit that space out. And one of the things we've thought about for both makerspace, for DE&I is the ability to create flex space in one of the office towers so that small companies can come in and work. Nonprofits can come in at a lower cost. But the reality is the cost to build that space is about $150 a square foot. So you're looking at millions of dollars, which the office buildings, since they're kind of vacant, just don't have. And so that's where, you know, they want to look to the city for incentive funding. But let me just run through. I mean, one, I think overall, the one comment was safety, safety, safety. And it comes from a number of different ideas. One, we have to have a visible safety presence on the street. And it was brought up that should not be police, or it should not be armed and uniformed police. It could be off-duty officers, but the idea was that it would be ambassadors. And, you know, these people would simply be on the street. They'd be warm bodies, boots on the ground. They'd be helpful people to give directions, to guide people, but just a visible safety presence, also a non-threatening presence. And I know there's a big part of our community that feels threatened by, you know, a police force on the street. I also don't think that you want to have a city that is, you know, every block you've got 10 police on it. But an ambassador program, I think, would be a great substitute. There are several examples in other cities, and Block by Block runs those, and Block by Block does run our ambassador program here in town. So we've got the information we need at hand to expand it. And then going beyond that, the city itself, and this might be marketing to some extent, but it's, you know, the city has to communicate so the city has to communicate what it's doing about safety. And I think that's what we're missing now is a lot of people that are saying we're not coming downtown or we're nervous about coming downtown don't really know what downtown is like. And so if we implement these safety programs, the city has to be at the forefront to say on a daily basis, this is what we're doing and making sure that people feel comfortable. Now, when you say it, you have to do it. So those people have to be on the street when you're there. And look, I know homelessness and street behavior is a controversial topic. But that is something that has to be addressed. It is a perceived safety issue for employers as they either look to bring employees back downtown, look to move into downtown Louisville. So it is something they're evaluating. And, you know, you have to think when you meet somebody new, you might give them, you know, you might make your opinion up about them in 5 or 10 minutes or maybe 2 minutes. And that is the same situation that the city's in when new companies are touring our town, is they're giving us, you know, 2 hours, and that's our first impression. And if it's met where they perceive it as a safety issue, they're going to go on to the next city. We are not a Nashville or a Charlotte or a Dallas where people are going to say we can come here, we can grow here, and it's great. This is a new place for us. So, you know, we want everything to be perfect. And I know everything can't be perfect, but street behavior is something that's cited, I would say, by every member of our committee as a negative in terms of how it impacts the perception of safety. I don't think anybody on the committee feels threatened by the homeless population, but it's that perception of safety. So that's what we have to drill down to and not, you know, get defensive. And I think, you know, obviously it goes without saying the people that are most affected by homelessness are the homeless, right? So, but that was a real key issue. And it's, you know, maybe you go beyond just saying it's the tents, but it's the street behavior actually in downtown where people are getting hit by panhandlers and stuff. So that's something that we're hoping with the presence of ambassadors on the street can step over that. The other, we talked about incentives. So that's incentives to help the office towers and owners develop space so that they can offer maybe flex space for minority companies, for new businesses, or anything that can come down at a lower cost and help lower that barrier of entry. But again, it's not something that a landlord or an owner of a building can do by himself. And then the other, we've talked about parking. Parking cost is an objection when you have a company that's located in the suburbs that's considering moving to downtown. They have free parking out in the suburbs. The cost difference in rental rate from downtown to the suburbs is not great enough. So you can locate in a top of class market in the suburbs, have free parking. It's still going to be cheaper than maybe locating in a tower downtown. And so if there's a way that we can help bridge that, either incentives to companies that come down, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. If you talk to some of the larger companies in downtown, they're able to flex muscle and get a lower rate just by the mere presence of their size and the numbers they give you. That's not something that's available to smaller companies because they just don't have the bandwidth or the parking ability to demand that many spaces. Let's see, we discussed street. This is a chicken or an egg, but we really want the city to encourage large office users to come back into downtown. And, you know, a lot of them are saying, you know, there's safety issues and this, and we have to work through our own measures. That's great. One that I think we can control is that a lot of them are saying we can't bring employees back down because there's so many restaurants are closed and there's no place for them to eat. We don't have the services for them. So we would look to the city to provide incentives to offset the operating costs. I think there's, you know, part of it would be incentives, rental incentives. If there's any restaurant operators on here, my guess is your biggest cost is not your rent, but it's your employee cost and your food cost. So looking to offset that cost so that you can open back up. And then we discussed the DE&I, create environments for Black-owned businesses to thrive in downtown. And I should say, we say Black-owned businesses, but in general, it's any sort of small business. And I think we want to specifically push toward getting minority businesses because I think they are underrepresented and they have been overlooked. But in general, how do we get small businesses or new businesses, I guess, correctly, into downtown? And that's where I think the office towers can give the space or supply the space for flex space. But we need some sort of incentive from the city to help offset that cost. I think that really covers it. On our 30, 60, 90, I would say that we are focused all on 30 days. Create visible and acceptable safety programs. Maybe instead of saying all of downtown, we're working these programs just on key corridors. And so determine what those are. I mean, obviously you might say it's 4th Street Live, Whiskey Row, 4th Street, whatever, but Main Street, but actually identify what those corridors would be. And then encouraging downtown occupiers to return. And then let me just circle back so we can cover the DE&I. And I don't know if Chantrice is on this call. I don't see her, but so there were really three things that Chantrice came up with her team on our subcommittee was, how can we be more intentional about best practices with downtown employers to hire minorities? And what she's saying is we got to go beyond just putting a Black Lives Matter sign in the windows of the buildings and that. And come up with creative ways to encourage and incentivize Black businesses through partnerships, incubators, and business forums sponsored by the city that paid Black business owners can use for their expertise. And she points out, if we don't intentionally include, we are unintentionally excluding. Again, back to incentives, create low interest loans, grants, funding for minority business owners to help them open up. And then the last was the Black Lives Matter protest created a false sense of insecurity amongst white people in our community about coming downtown. We need to combat that misperception and work with the protesters to gain insights. Should connect with the Black Lives Matter as a committee and get some insights on how we can better work with protesters. So that's a summary. If I'm happy to take any questions.
And Doug, I just wanted to add into this.
Yeah,
Gary Yates with Metro. That a lot of the downtown employees won't be returning full time. There will be that sort of intermittent sort of work from home a few days a week, work from the office a few days a week too. And if that is becoming more and more permanent trend as it has over the last decade, both nationally and locally too, of the office tenants consolidating and things like that, and encouraging more work from home and flex office space and things like that, then how do we, if we're turning down office, turning down a bit in office employees, then how do we bump up in terms of residents and things like that? I mean, hotels are great, but how do we really move the needle and getting more residents downtown?
Thanks, Claire.
Any other comments, questions for Doug?
Doug, I'd just be interested in knowing, I heard your list. And the restaurants, of course, there's a chicken and an egg issue because some of the restaurants can't survive without lunchtime business. But I do know just on Whiskey Row, there are a couple of restaurants that have been closed for a year that are getting ready to open. And I just wonder how much that's the issue versus this perception of safety. I mean, what's the real driver, or is it, I don't know if I misunderstood Claire, but are some of them just not coming back, period, regardless?
Val, I think that's, if you talk about businesses, I think that's an unknown answer. I think they're all coming back, but I shouldn't say that. Some have moved out. and have moved to the suburbs. And, you know, part of the committee, we want to stem that tide or that flow out of downtown. Yeah, some may not come back and some may come back in a smaller capacity. And like Claire said, you might have some that come back in a full capacity, but only ever at a 50% capacity on a day-to-day basis in their office. And that is, I mean, that's going to impact retailers. There is no doubt about that. So the question isn't, in my mind, Val, isn't how, I mean, part of the question is, how do we get the existing businesses back downtown? But if we accept the reality that we're probably going to have a smaller footprint in downtown after this is all over, then the real question is, or the real answer is, we have to attract new companies into downtown. And I'm not talking a 5-member company. I mean, we're talking a regional headquarters, something along the lines of Baird, Humana, well, Humana's headquarters, LG&E, but PNC, you know, PNC, Baird both have large regional headquarters presence in downtown. That's what we need. That will help, you know, raise all boats at that point, because you'll have more demand for residential, you'll have more demand for retail. But if we stay at the status quo from office usage, I think it's really going to hurt the retailers in downtown.
Yeah. Hey, and just to keep us pushing forward, thanks, Doug, for the update. I think this is a great segue, because some of the things, Doug, you talked about goes into the small and local business group. So Nichand, I hope I got your name right. Correct me if I didn't. I apologize if I got it wrong. I want you to speak here as well.
Nichand is not present with us, but she has appointed Mike King to deliver the presentation in her place.
Okay, so Mike, if you could go, and then I want to make sure we give time to Councilman Chakori Arthur as well to speak to diversity, equity, and inclusion before we wrap it up. So we got about 14 minutes left, so let's keep going here. So Mike, floor is yours.
Thank you. And yeah, we've got a really fun group that's been very engaged. We had some really good conversation. The joy of going last in these sort of things is a lot of the things have already been said. So I can go kind of quickly through a few of these without really expanding on them too much. But in general, we kind of talked about from the small business perspective, especially with the retail and restaurant sort of side of things, that obviously it's been a very tough year for them on a lot of different accounts. But kind of back to your original point, Douglas, of trying to make downtown better than it ever has been before. So one of those ideas that came out through that was to institute sort of a community-wide survey about downtown specifically, not just the people that are downtown, not just the people that work downtown, live downtown, so on and so forth, but really to cast that net wider and to talk to Louisville Metro and even the region as a whole, and start to hear from people the things that they like about downtown and the things that they don't like about downtown, and where some opportunities to fill those are. Additionally, this has been talked about a little bit, but one of the things that definitely came up through our conversations was improving and sort of simplifying some of these opportunities for events that could include street closures, but not necessarily just events that fully close streets, but also opportunities that simplify it for restaurants to expand out into the street, to do some sort of on-street dining options. It's something we as Louisville Metro sort of piloted this past fall and are already seeing some interest in that happening right now. But the regulations and the process of being able to get approval for that is beyond challenging. So a way to simplify that, but also it ties pretty well into just general dining on sidewalks and the permits and everything that comes along with that. It can be very cumbersome and very difficult to navigate. So any way that we can simplify those down was something that was definitely talked about in our conversations. Another sort of infrastructure component to it was something that Metro has been working on for some time, but it's definitely taking a while to really get going. And that's converting a lot of our downtown roadways to two-way streets to make the city more navigable, make it easier for people to realize where they're going, to not have to take 3 lefts if you miss something on a street. But then also when you convert our streets to two-way, you ultimately slow cars down. and you start to make it feel a little more pedestrian friendly. And that's the way that it feels from the conversations in our group. That's where we would get the most influence, is to create our downtown more for people, as opposed to our infrastructure system that currently is sort of built to get people into and out of as quickly as possible. Some general ones on top of that, we talked about that there is, despite some recent efforts and things are looking a little bit better, there's still a lot of garbage and a lot of trash and clutter that's on our streets. Some of the garbage cans are still missing from places that were there before. So that could be a pretty quick win, is sort of a continual cleanup process of downtown, and installing some kind of permanent garbage cans where we're seeing some littering issues and things along those lines. Another one we talked about is a directory of sort of downtown businesses. And we kind of looked at that in threefold. One, the ultimate goal, and let me backtrack just a moment for that. One of the challenges that came, especially from the pandemic, is restaurants' hours and retail shop hours aren't always reflected on your Google app or whatever you might use to generally go and kind of check out what's open and what's not. Those don't get updated completely all the time. So instead, sort of in-game, maybe developing some sort of app that downtown could utilize, that constantly gets updated and is able to add the new businesses that are downtown, but as well as keeping hours and maybe descriptions of some of those businesses. Obviously, that would take a little bit longer to do. But one of the other things that came out of that conversation is a lot of people really just like having a paper map that sort of shows that. So we've actually talked with the Downtown Partnership. They have sort of rip-off pad maps that have been wildly popular over the years. They're in the process of updating that. And one of the reasons those are so effective, we thought, was because hotels and sort of tourist destinations, they can have those pads. And then when you talk to a concierge or whomever, they can jot a couple of their personal notes down on the back and make it a little bit more personable, and people tend to respond to that a little bit better. The others that we had on here are just, like I said, kind of going back to that, making downtown better than it's before, is looking at opportunities to increase the number of small businesses, especially from a retail perspective in downtown. And then the other ones I'll go through kind of quickly because I think they've been talked about already. Those are the incubators and the pop-ups. Encouraging downtown workers to come back. It's absolutely critical for daytime business, for these small businesses to have the workers downtown that spend their money going out to eat or going out to get something from one of the shops. And then finally, is most of them are down, but there's still some boards up in a few parts of downtown. So that perception that's been talked about, as people continue to come downtown, it's kind of a second chance to make a first impression, and first impressions can really go a long way. So making sure that downtown puts its best foot forward as people begin to return. That was kind of the condensed version of what we talked about. If anybody has any questions, or if anybody from our group wants to add anything to it, please just say so.
Thanks, Michael. And look, just for the sake of time here, what I would say is, if anyone has any questions or thoughts to add to what Michael just shared, feel free to put them in the chat so that we can address them there. So and hopefully, as we get into a rhythm around this, we can make sure we got enough time for everyone. But thanks, Michael, for the update. I appreciate it. And again, feel free to leverage the chat as well here in the last six minutes or so of this meeting. So. Thank you, Michael. Councilman Ja'Cory Arthur, you want to go next? And by the way, you all know that obviously from the racial equity toolkit training that we went through, what we've talked about regarding diversity, inclusion, and equity, this is a key part of what we need to deliver on in our final plan. And we have a committee that's going to hold us all accountable to doing that. I believe we have a committee member from every single committee that makes up Councilman Arthur's committee with regards to DE&I. So Councilman Arthur, I'll give you the floor.
All right. First of all, I'd like to say we need more sisters in our DE&I work. So Yvonne, if you're down, hit me up and let me know. And in case everyone was unaware, we have a number of BLM leaders and organizers sprinkled throughout the committee, sprinkled throughout this group. So the protest voice, the Black voice, the impoverished voice is very much so represented in the work that we're doing. The DE&I work group is having 3 meetings, PSA. Meeting 1, we talk about the problems. Meeting 2, we talk about the solutions. Meeting 3, we talk about the actions. Our first meeting, we just really answered a simple question: what's keeping downtown Louisville from being diverse, equitable, and inclusive? Everyone has been assigned 2 goals based on the committees that they represent. And in the next meeting that we have coming up in the next couple of weeks, we'll actually turn those problems into the solutions through SMART goals and making sure that we're implementing them in the last meeting for the action. What are the action items that we're going to take to make sure this happens? It's important to note that the framework that we're working from is not the DE&I that we've seen become popular over the last decade, not the DE&I that became really like a hot topic in the past year, even in 2020. That DE&I is almost a trick bag. It's a bait and switch. You have companies that have started DE&I trainings not to help the people who have been discriminated against, but to protect themselves from discrimination lawsuits. The work that we're doing and the way that we're approaching DE&I is to center the people who have been most impacted. And when you think about that in relation to houselessness, when you help the people who have been most impacted, the people that are at the bottom, you actually help everyone. You help all of the above. So we are definitely going to work from that angle. And if the SMART goals don't benefit them, if those people don't benefit, then we will not implement. And an example of what those SMART goals look like in real time, something that I'm currently working on, is to create a houseless outreach collaborative with the Louisville Downtown Partnership, Office for Resilience and Community Services, and the the Coalition for Homelessness, to house 10 people by the end of the year. It's specific. Thinking about the SMART goals here, it's specific because we have a target and we have the partners in place. It's measurable because we know that we highlighted at least 10 people to be housed. It's achievable because we outline those partners and we know there are specific people and all of those entities that deal with houselessness, and they have the budgets and the capacity to continue to deal with this issue through this lens. It's relevant because last year we had over 9,100 people who experienced homelessness, 280 who are actually outside, and over half of them are in the downtown area. And then it's time-based because we identified that we wanted to do this by the end of 2021. So that's an example of one of many goals that kind of came out of that first meeting. Again, those goals are being worked on now until the next meeting where we'll actually sit down and hash them out. We'll give them back to the committee so that you all can have input and finalize them. And then for our last meeting, we'll talk about action items to come out of that. Dream would be to have 5 goals per committee. So then we'll have 30 DE&I goals total from the Downtown Revitalization team. That's our update.
Thanks, Councilman Arthur. Anyone, any questions, comments? No, we just got 2.5 minutes left, but either Michael or Jakori, we went through that pretty quick. I want to make sure we give a second to address anything. If not, feel free to put it in the chat, reach out to those guys individually. Okay. Well, look, number one, we'll make sure we get notes out as needed, and we'll continue to give updates and talk about some of these other things around the budget, because that's going to be key. How do we continue to potentially try to activate folks who want to keep this going, not just ideate, but also try to implement, and then also get updates from the city on the work that they're doing. So we're still working through those details, as I mentioned earlier, but I do want to bring that to this group so that we understand what's going on there. In your calendars, you should have all the meetings. If you don't, reach out to Andrea. We can get that fixed pretty easily. So please let us know if you don't have, either these meetings or committee meetings or general body meetings. We can make sure we get that fixed. So please let us know if you don't have that. And again, please, I'll say this again, I'm going to kind of continue to beat this drum. Our goal as a group should be, how do we make downtown Louisville better than it ever was? Not the way it was back in the summer of 2019, not the way it was back in February of 2020 before the pandemic hit. This is better. It might sound a bit too aspirational, but if we don't try to think about it in that way, this is not going to be the best in terms of the planning that we're doing here. It won't be the best outcome, quite frankly. So how do we set that aspirational goal about this being something that is different in a better, more positive way from all the different dimensions that we talked about here versus going back to the way things were. Okay. So with that, hey, look, all of you guys are busy. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your work thus far. More work to do. But I know this is a big time commitment for all of you. So I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we will talk soon. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.